February 14, 1933. Bumpy Johnson walked into a fight he was never supposed to survive. 12 men against one. Dutch Schultz had dispatched his most lethal hitters, the kind of men whose reputations traveled faster than their names. Tommy, the executioner, Vento, Marty, Icepick, Delaney, and several others so unknown that even the NYPD couldn't identify them. They trapped Bumpy beneath the Cotton Club, deep in the basement. No witnesses, one narrow exit, no escape. Bumpy was only 27, still climbing the ladder of Harlem's underworld. Dutch Schultz, on the other hand, was already a legend, the most feared gangster in New York. Everyone assumed the outcome was obvious. Another body on the floor, another warning to Harlem. But the Dutch made one critical mistake. He assumed Bumpy Johnson played by the same rules as everyone else. 90 minutes later, only one man from that 12-person crew walked out alive, and the message he carried back was enough to drain the color from the face of a man who had personally ordered more than 40 deaths. This was the night Bumpy Johnson became untouchable. To understand how that happened, you have to understand Harlem in 1933. The Renaissance was over. The Great Depression had crushed the neighborhood. Jobs were scarce. The money was gone. And when people have nothing, they gamble. The numbers racket, an illegal lottery, kept Harlem alive. A nickel could turn into $50. For people earning $7 a week, that nickel wasn't just a bet, it was hope. And hope had value. Dutch Schultz recognized that value immediately. A Bronx-born mobster who had made millions during Prohibition, Dutch saw the writing on the wall. Alcohol profits were drying up, and he needed a new operation. Harlem's numbers game was printing money, and he wanted control of every cent. There was just one obstacle. Harlem already had rulers. Madame Stephanie St. Clair ran the numbers, and standing beside her was her enforcer, Ellsworth, Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy wasn't a typical muscle. He wasn't just a gunman. Prison had sharpened him. He read Shakespeare, studied philosophy, and understood something most criminals didn't. Fear might control people, but loyalty ruled Harlem. When St. Clair's runners were robbed, Bumpy recovered the cash. When corrupt pops targeted black-owned businesses, Bumpy made the problem disappear, sometimes through force, sometimes by destroying careers and reputations instead. He planned, he calculated, and most importantly, he refused to submit to Dutch Schultz. In January 1933, Dutch made his move. He sent representatives to Harlem, meeting Madame St. Clair at her club on 133rd Street. Their offer wasn't subtle. Partner with Dutch, pay tribute, or be erased. Madame St. Clair looked at the men sitting across from her and told them to leave. They turned to Bumpy, standing quietly nearby. "You want to think this through, kid?"
Bumpy said nothing. He didn't move. He just stared. It was the kind of stare that made grown men reconsider their future. The emissaries left and reported back. And Dutch Schultz, who had never been denied by anyone, especially not a black woman and her enforcer, made his decision: destroy everything. He didn't just want Bumpy dead. He wanted the death to send a message, violent, unmistakable, and public enough to scare Harlem into submission. Then came Valentine's Day, ironic considering what followed. Bumpy received word that Dutch's men planned to hit Madame St. Clair's main counting house on Lenox Avenue at dawn. He went to investigate alone. That may have been a mistake, or maybe Bumpy knew exactly where this road led. The Cotton Club basement wasn't the glamorous venue tourists knew. That was for white patrons downtown. This was the real after-hours spot, where Harlem's power brokers drank, gambled, and settled scores. The basement held liquor crates, card tables, and one narrow staircase leading out, a perfect killing room. At 4:32 a.m., Bumpy stepped down the stairs. One dim bulb swayed overhead. Then came the sound. Metal clicks, one after another. 12 safeties disengaging. Men emerged from the shadows. Tommy, the executioner, stepped forward. He had killed 16 men, always up close, always face to face. He smiled. Dutch sends his regards. Bumpy stood still, hands relaxed, eyes calm. He scanned the room, counting silently. 12. Then he looked back at Tommy. "That's everyone?" Tommy's grin faltered. Bumpy Johnson never bluffed. If he spoke, it was deliberate. Standing there, outnumbered 12-1, asking if that was all. They weren't empty words. They were math. "You got 5 seconds to beg," Tommy said, lifting his gun. "You're making a mistake," Bumpy replied. "What mistake? You're finished." "The mistake," Bumpy said evenly, "is thinking I walked in here alone." The gun stayed trained on him, but doubt crept in. Tommy glanced at the stairs. Empty. He looked back. "You're bluffing." Bumpy smiled for the first time. "Then shoot." No one fired. Because what Dutch Schultz's men didn't know was that Bumpy Johnson had been fighting since childhood, on the streets of Charleston, in prison riots, in territorial wars. He had learned something few men ever do. Violence has timing, and in that basement, Bumpy controlled it. Tommy tightened his grip. Last chance. Bumpy moved. What followed was chaos, so fast and violent that even the lone survivor couldn't fully explain it later. His testimony was broken, confused, but this much is clear. Bumpy didn't reach for a gun. He went for the light. One strike shattered the bulb. Total darkness. Then a panic. Shots exploded wildly, men firing at shadows, at sounds, at each other. Tommy screamed for them to stop firing, but fear didn't obey commands. And in that darkness,
Bumpy Johnson changed. This was his territory. He'd spent countless nights in that room, playing cards, watching deals go down, memorizing every crate, every table, every blind corner. Dutch Schultz's men didn't have that advantage. They were lost. One by one, the sounds told the story. Bodies hitting the floor, men crying out in panic. Not because Bumpy was shooting, he barely fired at all. He didn't need to. He used their fear, their confusion. He let them turn their guns on each other. A scream, a crash, a gunshot, too close. Tommy tried to regain control, get to the stairs, move, but Bumpy was already there. The whole thing lasted maybe 3 minutes. It felt endless to the men trapped inside. Then, silence. When someone upstairs finally opened the basement door and light flooded down the steps, the scene was unreal. 11 men were down, some dead, others alive but broken, bones shattered, bleeding from bullets fired by their own crew, barely conscious. Only one man remained sitting upright, his back against the wall, chest heaving, gun trembling in his hands. Marty Delaney. Bumpy Johnson was gone, like smoke. Marty dragged himself up the stairs. It took him nearly 20 minutes. Every movement sent pain through his body, cracked ribs, internal damage, blood everywhere. As dawn broke, he reached the street and flagged down a cab, paying with cash soaked red. "Bronx," he whispered, "Arthur Avenue." At 8:17 a.m., Marty staggered into Dutch Schultz's social club. The Dutch were calm, eating breakfast, sipping coffee, newspaper in hand. He looked up, saw Marty drenched in blood, and froze. "Where are the others?" Marty couldn't answer. He just shook his head. "They're dead?" Dutch asked. "All of them," Marty finally whispered. He let me live." The Dutch stood slowly. "He what?" "He let me live to deliver a message." The room went silent. Lieutenants, bodyguards, accountants, everyone stopped moving. Dutch's voice dropped. "What message?" Marty reached inside his jacket, hands tensed, guns shifted. He pulled out a single playing card, the ace of spades, smeared with blood, and placed it on the table. He said Harlem isn't for sale, and if you send more men, send more cards. He's building a deck. The Dutch stared at the card. His men waited.
for rage, for orders, for war.
Instead, Dutch picked it up, studied it, and smiled, not with joy, with acceptance. "He's got nerve," Dutch said quietly. "I'll give him that." "Boss, we can't let this go." Dutch raised his hand. "You know what it costs to fight someone who isn't afraid to die?" he said. "Someone smarter than you? Someone backed by an entire neighborhood?" He shook his head. "It costs everything." He dropped the card into an ashtray and set it on fire. "We're finished in Harlem. Let Bumpy Johnson have it." The room was stunned. Dutch Schultz, who'd battled Lucky Luciano, betrayed partners, and never backed down, walked away because Bumpy had done the one thing even the Dutch respected? He proved he was willing to die for what he believed in. And men like that, you don't fight them. You either kill them or leave them alone. And the Dutch couldn't kill him. Years later, in the 1970s, a reporter tracked down a former Cotton Club employee and asked what truly happened that night. The old man smiled. "You want the truth? Bumpy wasn't alone." He explained that 4 of Bumpy's men had been waiting upstairs the entire time. Once the Dutch's crew went down, they locked the basement door from the outside. Bumpy could have killed every single one of them, but he didn't. He let one man live on purpose, because Bumpy understood something simple. Mass murder starts wars. Humiliation ends them. Whether that's fact or legend, no one knows for sure. What we do know is this: Dutch Schultz never sent another man into Harlem. Bumpy Johnson became the undisputed ruler of Harlem's underworld. For the next 35 years, he guarded that neighborhood like family, not with chaos, but with discipline, intelligence, and a code. And that ace of spades? Bumpy kept it, framed it, hung it in his office. A reminder that respect isn't handed out, it's taken. February 14th, 1933, 12 men walked into a basement. 1 walked out, and Harlem was never the same. If this story hits you, hit subscribe. We're telling the Bumpy Johnson stories history left behind, the moments that made him a legend, and the code that made him untouchable. Drop a like if you think Bumpy was the smartest man in Harlem, and in the comments, what would you have done if you were Dutch Schultz? More legendary stories coming next. Don't miss them.